Hi, my name is Ian Heller, and you are listening or watching What If I'm Right? Today, I have a fabulous guest. Her name is Dr. Lenni. Well, I don't know if she's doctor. Professor Lenni Benson. She's an attorney, so she's professor like me. Professor Lenni Benson. And we're going to be talking about immigration status and also law, but from the perspective of why it doesn't work the way we think it ought to work. And to my mind, that's fascinating. You know, if it's a snooze to you, just subscribe and close your eyes. But it's just to my mind, what people don't understand about the law is that it was never designed to be moral. It just wasn't. I'm not saying that there is no morality in our law. What I'm saying is the people who write our laws always think that whatever they're saying is moral. Satan thinks that he's doing a damn good job in hell. Okay. People who are trying to impose their will on others don't see themselves as being evil. They see the rest of us as being beneath them. And that is kind of the story of how Americans have sadly, periodically, not always, throughout our history, treated and mistreated our visitors. Well, not our visitors if they're, if they're going out and they're, as if they're tourists, we're good with them. But people moving to this country, it's like a love-hate relationship. And this has been going on forever. The first group that was actually told that they can't come were Chinese women and then Chinese men. Why? First it was, well, we don't want the Chinese women because, well, they're all, what? They're all sex workers. Now, by the way, I didn't come up with this. I'm only actually making it sound nice. They called them much worse on the floor of Congress. And laws were enacted. And it seems to me, as ludicrous as it is, to think that an entire population of women are somehow courtesans. That's insane. And yet, I think they believed it. And so when we look at the law and we think, well, where's the morality in the law? Morality in the law comes from, it's the eye of the beholder, or in this case, it's in the eye of the congressperson, the president, the judge, the people who create, enforce, and interpret our laws, create Congress, enforce the executive branch, interpret the judicial branch. They believe, and I truly believe that this is true. You can disagree with me, but what if I'm right? But they believe that they're doing something for the betterment of their country. Sometimes they think that the country should only be in the hands of people who are like them, whether that means white or black or Christian or Jewish or Muslim or wealthy or landowners. Yeah. You see, when laws are created to prohibit people who don't own land from voting, the thought behind that horrible idea, which was quite popular for quite some time in this country and others, the thought behind it was, if you don't own land, the 1700s, 1800s, then you don't really have a stake in our democracy. If you don't have a stake in our democracy, all you're going to want to do when you pass laws is to make sure that you get my money. You're not going to actually work hard. You're going to just try and take my money from me. And the only reason why you have a job is because of the work that I do. Now, that sounds pretty egregious, but I think a lot of people actually believe things like that. And by the way, that's not limited to the people who have money, but the people who want to one day ascend to being ridiculously wealthy. And so when we look at how immigration has ebbed and flowed as far as its popularity. Just so you understand, right before 9/11, there was going to be a bipartisan bill that was going to broaden and support more people to immigrate to the United States because we make good money on their work, on their coming in and contributing to becoming doctors and lawyers and picking lettuce and tomatoes. The whole gamut. We benefit. It was a bipartisan operation to make it more welcoming in this country to immigrants. And then 9/11 happens and everybody gets scared. And man, I live in New York. I was there. I was right here. I wasn't in anywhere near the actual planes that went into the World Trade Center, but I was in Manhattan. That's where I live. And man, suddenly the whole country was united because there was this sense of we've got an enemy we can all unify around. And when two jets are flown into our uh, one of the greatest symbols of our democracy and our economy, the World Trade Towers, or the Pentagon, our might, well chosen, well chosen targets. I don't mean to pay a compliment, but they really hit hard, very hard. We, as a nation, unified around picking ourselves up, cleaning up the rubble, burying with dignity the dead and the remains of the dead, and then we wanted to make sure that we protected ourselves so that would never ever happen again. All perfectly legitimate motivations. But unfortunately, over time, it metastasized, and we have now othered so many people. It started with people from Iraq and various other, in Afghanistan, not the people who actually committed this, but the entire people of nations. And it metastasized to the point that we just really treat people who are not what we would consider typical American as enemies. And it didn't come from an evil place. It started from fear and from unity. But I hate to continue to use the same word, it metastasized. But that doesn't mean that we are condemned to live in this manner forever. In fact, these situations truly ebb and flow. The Alien and Sedition Act, way back in the Adams and John Adams and Jefferson, we move to we move all the way to the Know Nothing Party and the um, immigrants from I think Ireland, or, if I'm not mistaken. We move forward to the Chinese who are first welcome because we need a railroad to be built. And then they're no longer welcome. So we create opium laws in San Francisco to make sure they understand you weren't here as our friends. And we prohibited Chinese people. We prohibited Chinese people up until I think it was 1948 from ever becoming citizens. Yeah. I mean, oh my God. So, well, no, what I should say is Chinese immigrants from becoming citizens. However, if you were born in the United States, even of undocumented aliens, then you would be considered an American. That's in the Supreme Court right now. So this stuff about immigration, it goes way back, it goes very deep, and it's very current. And so my guest, Professor Lenni Benson, is going to speak with me about so many different topics related to immigration, mostly from the legal perspective. Of course, that's what she is. She's an attorney. and she does wonderful work. I hope you stick around to listen to our conversation. And don't forget, in the meantime, why don't you hit subscribe? Because I think this show is important. And I'd like you to help me grow this show so that we can change the narrative away from the hate and towards the value of human dignity and the economic value of inclusion. So, with that, thank you. What if I'm right with Ian Heller? And now, my conversation with Professor Lenni Benson. Hi, this is Ian Heller, and you are listening or watching What If I'm Right? Today, I have a wonderful guest. Her name is Professor Lenni Benson. Professor Benson has been teaching and writing in the field of immigration law since 1994. She is the Distinguished Chair Professor of Immigration and Human Rights Law at New York Law School. She founded the Safe Passage Project, which recruits, trains, and mentors attorneys to assist unaccompanied youth who are facing deportation, something we really sadly need a lot of these days. The Safe Passage Project began as a law school pro bono project clinic and is now a nonprofit with a staff of over 40 professionals housed at New York Law School that partners with the school's clinic. Safe Passage Project is currently assisting over 1,600 unaccompanied minors in New York. More than 500 pro bono attorneys are working with the project. I don't know whether I should be incredibly amazed and appreciative and grateful for all that work or horrified that it's necessary. But in
It's
any
just a
event,
drop in the bucket. I
yeah,
mean,
and I'm sure that's right. I'm
if
sure
the
that's right.
project had the capacity to quadruple, we still wouldn't meet all the need. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well, just
um,
to explain that to your audience, people assume that children are given attorneys and they're used to seeing that on television or maybe in their own life experience. So if a child is in juvenile justice or a child's in a family dispute, the judge might appoint a lawyer for a child. But when the most important issues in your life and death issues, such as seeking asylum or seeking protection in this country, you're not entitled to free counsel. And so that's why a few years ago, I kind of left my bookshelves and my desk and my academic pure role to roll up my sleeves and start mobilizing with my former students and my colleagues and my bar association friends. And really, it's just grown so large that now I get just to be the gray hair founder, but it's very, very active. And if people go to the website, safepassageproject.org, there's a place that says volunteer with us. So non-lawyers are welcome too if they're fluent in Spanish, Creole, French, Wola. There's a real need for people to uh, step forward to be pro bono assistants for language interpretation as well.
that's a fabulous introduction. And now I'd like to get into a real legal question with you.
Okay.
Sixth Amendment through the 14th Amendment provides that everybody is entitled to counsel. Now, if this was a criminal case and there were criminal punishments, I'm assuming, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that the Sixth Amendment would apply, and therefore they would have counsel provided for them at no cost to unless, of course, they're in a state that makes them pay them back, which is another story altogether
Yeah.
that just horrifies me. But any
Well,
event,
you
uh,
know,
but but
it's in,
why is it that they are not given
yeah.
counsel, given the extraordinary weight and implication of what they're going through?
So, Ian, you're driving right into the biggest legal fiction that governs most of immigration law. And that is that we're dealing not with criminal law or
That's
punishment
right.
law. We're dealing with what's called civil law. So, children can face or adults can face other serious legal things. Like until very recently, New York City didn't provide you free counsel if you're being evicted from your home. And it took public interest lawyers and policymakers and city council a long time to come to the conclusion that there are times in the law where even though we call it civil, it is so fundamental to your dignity, your safety, your well-being, and the systems are so complex that it is the right thing to do,
Hmm.
even if not mandated by the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution. Now, I should say that New York City Council, when I began teaching and working in New York in 1994, had very, very little money for immigration legal services. It has grown robustly. And one of the biggest source of funding for Safe Passage Project and many other nonprofits in the city of New York is our city council. And some people get angry about that. There's other needs citizens have. But this is one of the points I thought you and I could explore because you're also trained in sociology. It's not a them or an us. New York
It's
City,
us.
it is a
It's
we.
all
It
us.
is, it is a we.
That's
And
right.
so 60% of all the children born in the United States have someone in their household who might be mixed status. That's an enormous number. In New York City, if you go to Queens, it could be every other person was born somewhere else. But even in Manhattan, the foreign birth rate is about 33%. Now, that includes investment bankers from France and PhD scientists at Rockefeller University.
And if I
But
may, I think it
yeah,
would also include Baron Trump.
was he born abroad?
Well, he's not in the Bronx, but you know my point.
We're
He
going to
is,
talk about what is citizenship. Yes.
yeah,
But
well,
what I'm talking about here is like even on the less complex legal issue,
okay, fair enough.
we live in a society in the United States, 350 million people. We are at the percentage of foreign nationals in our population about the same as it was at the height of immigration at the end of the 19th century. So 1890s to 1910. Some people, that makes people very anxious, that this, who are we? What is our identity? Who is an American? Who Canadians are Americans. As Bad Bunny would say, we should name every country in the continent, as he did in the Super Bowl. But who is a U.S. citizen? Who's part of our polity? So I just want to say to any listener or viewer, if you're upset that our city council is providing some funding for legal services, it's because they don't perceive an immigrant as isolated from their family, their community, their job, their religious engagement, their community involvement. And so the city council really has come to recognize that we have to fill in a gap that the federal government is unwilling to make.
I'd like to add another reason that people are, and even the most progressive people are unaware of. As a result of the last, I don't know, basically since 2016, you can figure out what started that. There has been this fiction, this narrative about immigrants being one of the great causes of crime in the country.
Right. Right. Totally false.
And it's not just false, it's it is provably false and logically false. If you, as a sociologist as well as an attorney, what I know about criminology is they don't commit crimes anywhere near as much as citizens. And the reason is they're so of, I shouldn't say the only reason, but one of the reasons they never report crimes. They are so afraid of seeing a police officer, of seeing somebody who might identify them as being dangerous, or more important, more
My dog is
specifically, I
commenting.
love dogs. It's okay.
Oh,
He can come on if he wants. But
well, let me agree
like
with you.
they don't commit crimes at the
Right.
same levels, and yet they are being accused. I mean, horrifically accused
Yes.
of causing more crime.
So,
It's
so this is a
outrageous.
phenomena that, I just want to say, first of all, given that we know there's over policing of communities of color and communities where English is not a first language. So if we look at statistics in New York City of who's arrested, let's say for, drinking in an open container or in the old days for smoking marijuana cigarette on your soup, disproportionately Black and brown people. If you were a white person, you had less than I think 9% chance of ever being arrested for those offenses. So we know, given that there's over policing of people of color, And yet still, as you said, the statistics are that foreign-born people are arrested for and create crime much lower rates than our domestic population. And there's all kinds of reasons. But the phenomena that appeals to voters or to people just have common sense is a logical fallacy kind of, well, that may be true, but that person wouldn't have been assaulted or robbed or the drunk driving if that immigrant hadn't been here. And so it's a false causal chain of
I
saying,
think you're being kind. I really do.
well,
I do. I
it's an
think you're
emotional chain, right? It's an
yeah, but
emotional link.
I think you're being kind in that people are not trying to they are not accepting the numbers and saying, but there's an exception. They're not accepting the numbers. That they are denying those numbers are real. And I had a conversation. I have a lot of relationships with police officers. I teach at John Jay, and I have law enforcement in my family. And I've had many conversations with some of the younger law enforcement folks. And it's kind of like asking an oncologist. So, how's cancer? It's like, oh my God, it's everywhere.
Right.
When you speak with a police officer, understandably, they feel that crime is everywhere. And of course, wherever they are, what their job is to find crime. That's their job.
So they've been in a lot of corporate boardrooms lately, huh?
I'm sorry, say again.
Well, we're talking about street crime or violent crime,
But the
but there's a
perception of
whole
crime.
nother level of crime.
We'll get to white collar another
Yes,
time, but
which
my goodness, that's
the ordinary cop on the beat, the police officer is not going to be observing. No, I understand what you're saying. Sometimes I think this phenomenon, maybe as a sociologist, you can explain it to me, is there are times where it's a positive view. So let's take a look at a sports team. And we're going for our team. Yay, US hockey team in
we'll
the
talk about the
Olympics.
Knicks. We're not going to talk about any other
No,
team.
no,
This is
we're
the
going to
Knicks.
win. We're going to win. We're going to
It's the
win this
Knicks.
US hockey team. Right. Where are those hockey players from? Many of them
Yeah,
are
from all over
foreign
the
born.
world. Yeah.
But we then put the mantle of the American flag or the US flag on their uniform and suddenly they're US. So we do it. Sometimes we'll say, aren't we lucky that we got that outstanding Polish player or that outstanding Ukrainian or that outstanding Canadian? And of course, we could do it in baseball with an outstanding Japanese player or someone from the Dominican Republic. Sometimes we do it positively, but more often, there's, if you're looking at how do we have a better society? Who do I want to vote for? Why can't I find an apartment at a good rent? It is natural to find the simplest group that you might have the power to take out of competition with you. And so this is an ancient myth in immigration. You can look at the earliest
Oh, we can
legal
talk about Chinese
organization.
Immigration Act
Well, we can
stuff.
go further back.
Absolutely.
I'm talking one of the first Congresses after the French Revolution. Members of Congress stood up on the floor and said, we can't have the bloody French here or the wild Irish who are trying to win their freedom from the United Kingdom or from Britain. And so these are old, old, old myths, but I don't really understand them myself. And I don't feel it the same way that many people in our voting population or our students do, because I guess as a lawyer, as an analyst, as a social scientist, I try to train myself to look at evidence, not emotion. But maybe you can explain to me why this feeling of othering is so powerful in political debate.
I certainly won't make believe that I can answer that question. It's obviously far more nuanced, and it really the answer to that has to be it depends. However, um, the history, the ebb and flow of the welcoming and the hatred or the othering of, and I'll just stay in this country. So what people don't realize is that the first group that was isolated and was prohibited from coming into this country were Chinese women. Chinese women were not welcome because on the floor of Congress they claimed that Chinese women were all sex workers. I'm not making that up. They
Also
didn't use the word
prostitution,
sex worker.
right?
But that's what they, and so as a result, they had tens of thousands of Chinese men who were permitted to come in so long as the railroads needed to be finished. And there were like literally under like 200 Chinese women. Now they finish the job of connecting our entire nation and they need work. Many of them go to San Francisco. San Francisco becomes kind of the center of Chinese immigration in the mid to late 1800s. They started to get jobs that other white people in San Francisco had. And that, my friends, is the origin of the criminalization of opium, an addiction which was basically imposed upon them in the Opium Wars, where Great Britain forced opium to remain basically a scourge
Yeah.
for China. And so they
So
come here. It's just, and we
I'm with
made it
you, and I
illegal
just want
as
to
a
say,
result.
my gosh, we're trying to simplify
Yes, I'm
something
sorry.
complicated. There
Yes,
was also, very active political parties in California who were saying America should be for the white man, of course, ignoring our native population and our Black population. They wanted to at least pick the group that they thought that they could expel or keep from coming. But it's not the first group, because if you go back to the 1850s, the Know Nothing Party, which is such a strange name, right, of a political party, very
Heather
popular
Cox Richardson
in the United
talks
States,
about it all the time.
they wanted to stop Catholics from coming, and particularly the
That's
Irish.
right.
And they did it. They did it for a lot of reasons, but part of it was political power. And it's just so hard for us in today's complex global society to truly believe that our laws were written on these racial lines or religious lines until just recently, when the current administration and a number of opportunities, they have no hesitation to write policies and temporary, if not permanent, bans on adjudication or visa issuance, or trying to target particular populations based on their religion or nationality or race. But even the Biden administration and the Obama administration were also
Yes,
disproportionately targeting people of color.
that's right.
So if you do study criminology like you do, or law, constitutional law, immigration law like I do, we can't ignore the reality of courts are weak vessels, and sometimes, unfortunately, they affirm the power of the executive branch to execute unfairly these immigration barriers. And my students and I talk about a lot about which part of government is making these decisions. And like right now, we want to say Biden opened the border, Trump closed the border. Those That's way too simplistic.
Ray simplistic. Yeah.
And Congress
And
really,
you have to talk about COVID, the context of COVID, to
COVID, and
understand it as well.
yeah. And we also have to say Congress is also responsible. We have not had any comprehensive positive updating of our immigration laws. The last one that was a small blip was 1990, really, that kind of reformed some of the employment categories. We've had a one off here, a one off there, temporary visas sometimes for tech workers. But really, Congress, every time they try to bring about an immigration bill, there was the Gang of Eight bill in 2013. President Bush, the second one, almost had a bill going until the events of 9/11. This this issue just doesn't have traction in Congress because it is too easy in a primary campaign or political campaign to say, look, this candidate wants to bring in more workers who are going to take your jobs, not looking at the data, not looking at the economic power of immigrants, not looking at the vast population we have in our society that has no path to regular status. So I end every class lately, and I don't know about you, but I say, okay, students, we've studied these cases, we've studied, the limitations of litigating. What's the answer? And then
Well,
they
that's
all
not fair.
chant. No, they all chant with me now. Run for Congress.
Yeah.
But we need people to understand that it's not a president. or a member of Congress or one ICE officer. It is a massively complicated system that's extremely well funded. ICE and Customs and Border Patrol and parts of USCIS are the largest law enforcement agency in the world. In the world. Why? um, we have, our IRS is down to shreds. We don't seem to want to collect taxes. Our EPA is Environmental Protection Agency is being gutted, and there's criminal laws there as well. Our securities enforcement is being attacked, both as administrative law and their budgets are cut, their staff are cut. We only want to enforce civil immigration laws.
Yeah, I mean, that's just very consistent with so many things that we do, as we had kind of touched on before with white collar crime, which causes far more economic and actually physical harm to Americans than violent crime by quite a lot, actually. But I actually want to go. I just have to, just as a, because I just want to mention this, that the history of our nation, and I had forgotten to mention this when I said the Chinese exclusionary laws. Actually, no, you were right. You went a little earlier. Actually, we should have gone even earlier still,
Even earlier,
because Adams versus Jefferson, the reason why Adams lost to Jefferson were the Alien and Sedition Acts.
sedition laws. That's right.
And Adams wanted to make sure that there weren't German and Irish immigrants coming to the country because they tended to support the Democratic Republicans, which was Jefferson's party. So he outlawed them, basically, or made it impossible for them to vote. And so and look at right now, the Sedition Act is still being talked about. And it was the thing that one of the main reasons why John Adams got booted out of presidency after only
Mhm.
one term.
I'm
And
not
so
sure
it is a
everyone knows what
grand
sedition
tradition.
is. Do you want
I'm
to
sorry.
define sedition?
I'm going to let you do that because I don't want
Oh,
to sound
well,
like an idiot. Go ahead.
it was kind of a trick question. I mean, my sedition might be advocating for reform and fairness and opportunity. But if you're President Adams and I'm calling you lackluster, not caring for the working man, in the bed with the banks, um, part of the sedition laws said to critique the president could be a crime.
Was a
So
crime. That's
also
right.
there was, under those laws, the ability to stop the presses. And people say, but what about the First Amendment? Well, the First Amendment, as we know it today, sometimes still on a little bit of shaky legs, was not as robust. There wasn't a body of case law and court power interpreting. And so while the Alien Sedition laws were there and Congress did pass them, and it did lead to a political rebellion, throwing Adams out, bringing Jefferson in, we never really had the full judicial analysis of those laws because they ended up sunsetting.
That's right.
But today, our immigration laws
Welcome back.
they have had provisions that narrow the speech rights of foreign nationals. The first Supreme Court case that clearly said you could be excluded and deported for advocating for the rights of workers was a case called Turner in 1903. Very short Supreme Court opinion. It's like 2 paragraphs long. Turner was a labor leader in England. He'd been invited by Emma Goldman, one of my heroes, although she was a bloody anarchist. But she invited him to come to the US to do a speaking tour. He landed in Boston from a ship coming from England. He was a labor leader in England. He went to the venue where he was going to speak, and the police arrested him there. And he challenged the power of the federal government to keep him out of the country. He said, I don't advocate violent anarchism. My anarchy, which not everyone knows what political anarchy is a belief that men and women are inherently morally good, that with education and cooperation, they can accommodate themselves. They don't need the strong arm of the law or the police officers club to control society. And he wanted to advocate for this radical thing. Workers could collectively negotiate with employers.
Boy,
And
that's
that
not the
doesn't,
Supreme Court to mess with in those days.
so they said Congress has the power to exclude anarchists, whether they're peaceful anarchists or violent anarchists. And that statute's still in the books. So we've added to it every time we have any whiff of a political crisis like the Cold War, or wanting to stop some foreign nationals in the country that might be sleeper agents, like after the collapse of the US Embassy in Iran and the rise of the regime in Iran. Um, After 9/11, we keep adding provisions in the immigration law that make the definitions broader and broader and broader. So let me just give you one. If you're a foreign national, even with a green card, and you make a donation to a medical aid organization providing assistance in a region of the world that is in conflict, and you want to help people that have been bombed on Congo,
Perfect example. Yeah.
let's try southern Lebanon.
Okay.
If our government believes Hezbollah is really running that medical center, even though you donated to an
That's
American
right. You're supporting terrorism.
501(c)(3), you are supporting terrorism.
That's
The
right.
definition takes something like 5 pages in the code. It is so incredibly overbroad. There have been professors who've been refused visas to come and teach in the United States because at one point they wrote a check to support a hospital in the West Bank. Now, this goes both ways. I mean,
And it's a hospital.
yes. So,
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela was excluded from the United States, and every time, he was in prison for 20 years, but when he wanted to come and speak and address the UN, he had to have a special waiver
That's
to enter
right.
the United
Yes, I
States
remember that.
because the ANC, the African National Congress that brought about the end of apartheid, even though democratically elected, in their original platforms, just like Thomas Jefferson said, when the people must rise up to throw off the yoke of oppression, violence may be necessary. Our statutes say if you have ever advocated violence or been part of a political organization that does, you can be inadmissible, refused a visa, or even deportable.
Well, that's because the
So,
Declaration of Independence was only for us. And
yeah,
quite frankly, as a Jewish guy, it wasn't for me anyway. I
one of
wasn't
the
white.
things people should reread the Declaration of Independence.
What's a
One of
magnificent
the
document,
things they're
actually.
complaining about in it is Parliament and King George had put an anti-migration clause in the Acts of Parliament. And they had said, if you're a skilled laborer, you cannot freely migrate to the colonies because industrialization was rapidly beginning to start and there was a labor shortage. This is even in the late 1700s. Metal
It's a
workers.
brain drain, is what we call it now.
Yeah. Yeah. And so one of the things they object to without representation is the colonies are being starved because necessary and talented labor cannot come from the United Kingdom or England because of the Acts of Parliament and King George. So our founders were actually arguing for free migration. I think in my notes I sent you, people assume that somewhere in the Constitution it must talk about immigration,
Oh,
and it
nope.
doesn't.
Nope.
And it almost never uses the word citizen. Most of the provisions in the Bill of Rights, for example, due
Persons.
process, um, Eighth Amendment, all these things says persons. Because think who lived in our society besides our native peoples and our enslaved peoples, who lived in those 13 original colonies? Were they all people born in the United States? No, the vast majority were either recent immigrants themselves or maybe first generation. And so our founders didn't create a federal power that's expressed in the Constitution. And that is a problem because
Yeah.
as the Supreme Court has addressed this, they've said that immigration law, both in Congress and in the way the executive sometimes uses it, is unlimited because it's inherent in national sovereignty. I object to that. Many scholars object to that, but it is the current state of our law. So if you're saying, well, why did the Supreme Court allow this? Or why is President Trump writing an executive order for that? Or why did Mr. Biden or Mr. Obama get to do that? In part, if you read the very long immigration law, you would see Congress had given the president some wide discretion, but also our courts either don't have power to review the action of the government. It's called foreclosure of judicial review,
Yeah.
close the courthouse door.
I find that so horribly offensive that
People
it
don't
is even
people don't believe
constitutional.
it's the United
I don't
States.
believe,
Yeah.
I still can't believe that that the Congress can tell the courts, we're going to make a decision and you can't say anything about it. When did the checks and balances just, no, 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 we can get rid of checks and balances if we decide to.
Well,
And they
particularly in
can,
this
and they
kind of law.
have. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
and people are just not aware of this. Like, let me give a non-immigration example. The decision of a physician who believes you are a danger to others after you've served your criminal sentence if you've been a sex offender. The Supreme Court upheld the way Congress worded discretion to the medical professionals and the wardens to have a prolonged detention. Now, in theory, if you could show that medical evaluation was insufficient or was racially biased, you might be able to go back to court. Another one is if you have a high security clearance and the CIA wants to revoke your clearance and fire you, the statutes specifically say no court shall review that. But the Supreme Court, in a case, very old case called Webster v. Doe, said if the person alleges that the government is acting in an unconstitutional manner, they should have an opportunity for a court to see that. So in immigration law, we often have to say, we're not just objecting to the way the agency denied an asylum claim. We're saying that the manner in which they went about it fund- violated fundamental fairness, what we call due process.
And by the way, I'd like to make it clear that that is one of the most fundamental means for litigation historically, and the most common way that, at least that I'm aware of, is because I used to be a criminal defense attorney. I used to do Second Circuit appeals, and the way, but most of them were not federal cases; they were state cases. And so we lost all the way up, by the time it came to me, they already lost all the way up through the New York State Court of Appeals, which is what our Court of Appeals is called. We're not,
Our
we
highest
don't
court.
call it our Supreme Court. Our highest court is called the New York Court of Appeals. Don't ask.
Don't ask me why.
I don't care. It's just, okay, it's what it is. And in fact, one of the lowest trial court in New York City, the Supreme
Supreme
Court.
Court. Yeah.
Go figure. Anyway, so um, but but when they would come to me for an appeal in the federal side of things, I would have to make a habeas petition that said the reason why I want this transferred from the state courts where we lost everywhere to the federal courts is because there was a federal there was some sort of a federal violation, a
Constitutional
constitutional
violation.
violation.
Yeah.
And so that's how we get from state to federal, like state cases. Arizona v. Miranda, that's a state case. It only made it to the Supreme Court in the United States
Yeah.
Supreme Court after losing in Arizona.
Yeah. I'm from Arizona, by the way.
Oh,
A
well,
lot of famous cases come from my state because it's so repressive. In my
oh,
golf,
you don't hold the record on that.
not
Don't
anymore.
you can't do no, it's not even close.
In Ray Galt, which is about juvenile justice,
Yeah,
that was also a habeas to get a young person who is
they
incarcerated to
all
age
almost all
21
of them.
without process. But, this is really important that people who are lay, people who've never studied the law, who have lots of knowledge, they could pass, they could pass the citizenship test. They could describe the separation of powers, but they don't know these dark areas of the law where Congress cuts away and cuts away. So an example in your area, you were just describing federal habeas. In 1996, the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act said that a prisoner should only have one federal habeas. And, whenever the Congress tries to draw a box or a
Hmm.
line, then we lawyers, we have to do what we have to do. We often will say, but there should be an exception for this or an exception for that. So while Congress may think they have tailored and cut, I call it making paper dolls, that they've cut around things, but when you actually open it up, you've multiplied the theories and the complexity of the litigation.
Yeah, well, Swiss
So,
cheese law.
this is just a statistic I don't think I shared with you. This last couple of years, in this new administration, Mr. Trump's second administration, the DHS has been arresting people in places they never did before. So we've seen it on YouTube, or we've seen it in the news, arresting people at courthouses, whether they're at family court or
Churches.
going to their
Oh my
immigration hearing,
goodness, just amazing.
sweeps in parks using racial profiling, etc. And a lot of these issues are still going on. But here's a statistic that just blew me away. As of the end of April, there were 10,000 habeas petitions filed just seeking release of a foreign national or a bond hearing in the immigration court, 10,000. In the year before, there were less than 200. So what's going on for the federal courts? This is enormous. I looked up some statistics for something else I was doing this week. In the 2025 annual report, that is the federal court workload, 80% of all of the appellate cases are immigration cases.
Well,
So,
we
so,
reap what we sow.
so, if you're going to be a federal judge, if you're going to be a federal magistrate, if you're going to be a federal law clerk,
AI can't do it
you
yet.
don't take immigration, you really are saying, well, no, that's just a little side area. Well, it's not, because people, even though Congress has cut it way back, as I've said, there's still, with every new constitutional violation or with new ignoring statutes or rapidly shifting policy, people are going to court. So I
Can I
think
just
you
interrupt
might want
for
to
just
talk about, okay, go ahead. Yeah,
yeah, no, because there is a point that we all gloss over, and people use the term habeas corpus all the time, and they
right.
really don't know what it means. And quite
Yeah.
frankly, know at least a handful of lawyers who don't either. It has its origins, the Magna Carta in 1215. Habeas corpus, which by the way is probably the most important document ever written in our language, and it may
Yeah.
be in any language. It's
Because it limited
absolutely
the power of the absolute
my
monarch against the
my
people.
goodness, it,
Yeah.
it completely changed the world. It really did. But in any event, before I go down that rabbit hole, habeas corpus is a very simple concept. It just means give us the body, deliver the body, habeas corpus, give us the body. All that means is, and it's Latin, all it means is there's somebody who is languishing in a dungeon, in a prison somewhere, and we don't feel that they're getting their due process. They have not been before a court. They have not been before a judge. They have not been before a magistrate. They're just languishing. That is the origin. And so habeas corpus was designed to go to the government and say, you can't just leave somebody in a prison cell and just make believe they're not there and then just throw them away. Habeas corpus says, hey, judge, the government is holding somebody and their rights are being denied. And that is still a fundamental principle to
Yeah.
American judicial
Let, let's
democracy, which
let's
is
go
we want to make sure everybody gets their opportunity to be heard, even
let's go
you
back
after I
to where
speak
we
so long.
started. You asked me whether the Sixth Amendment right to counsel attached to civil proceedings that are
That's
immigration
right.
proceedings, and I said no.
That'd be the Seventh Amendment anyway, but that's okay.
Here's one of the odd things about immigration law: we lock people up.
Hmm.
Well, first of all, lots of studies have been done that you do not need to use detention, which is over $250 of taxpayer money a day. And a lot of the detention is in private prisons
That's
and
right. And that's
red
increasing, by the
state and
way.
local prisons. I was reading the story about the legislative bill that the legislature in New York just signed, where they're going to unwind some of these agreements. But there's plenty of upstate counties or Long Island counties that make a lot of money from offering prison space to house foreign nationals.
By the way, not the
Well,
people who work there,
yeah,
only the people who own them. The people who work there are
don't get the money. Yeah.
they're mistreated far worse than the Department of Corrections does in the state and city in the state and county institutions.
But what I want us to examine, maybe from a sociological point of view, a jurisprudential point of view, a human rights point of view, why are we detaining people? We got rid of debtors' prisons in 1838.
Yeah, we didn't. It's still here. It
Well,
is.
well, debtor.
In theory, we got rid of it. It
Okay,
is not gone.
we have incarceration sometimes for people who are a danger to themselves or others, but they get appointed counsel, they get to go before a judge quickly, they get constant review. The Supreme Court has refused to say, it's been close sometimes, 5-4, refused to say that for a civil immigration violation, there is a limit on detention. The only thing they've been willing to say is because the statute says immigration authorities have 180 days to remove someone, that you can't be indefinitely detained if a country won't take you. So if you're from the former Soviet Union and you claim you're no longer Russian or you're not Georgian or you're not Ukrainian, you're not Azerbaijani, and there's no way to get that country to take you. You might be detained for years, but eventually our government, the Supreme Court has said, will release you. But Congress, over and over and over again, writes long lists of people that shall be detained. And this doesn't make any sense.
Well,
Uh, it is something people just willingly accept. They see the horrible images. They hear about the 10,000 habeas petitions of moms grabbed from their kids or workers grabbed from the Home Depot parking lot or people swept up at court. And they just think, oh, well, they violated the immigration law. Violating the immigration law, if you overstayed a visa in the United States, it's not a crime. And if you cross the border without a visa, it's a misdemeanor. So
yeah, it's not a
we we have much worse crimes for violating copyright law, for dumping your pollutants in the storm drain. So what is going on sociologically, politically, that we live with and accept the detention regime? And I really don't know.
the using the sociological lens on this. Um, we have groups of people who are on a gosh, maybe Emmett will remind me. He's a former student of mine, actually brilliant. Probably knows more sociology than I do, but shh, don't tell anybody. Um, and they are basically, they're called. Oh, I can't think of the word, but these are people who have historically been our pincushion, and there is an absolute term, and I can't remember what it is. I'll remember in the middle of a sentence of yours, and I'll
Right.
interrupt you.
So
But
just people who are considered less or other or the source of all societal.
well, it's kind of like Jews in Nazi Germany.
Yeah. Or
A
or
scapegoat?
We
Jews in New York in
oh wait, I think
1890.
wait, Emmett, I think
Emmett,
it's
do you
going to
have
get
the word for us?
Are you
We'll edit
thinking
it.
of
what
a
is it, Emmett?
scapegoat? Are you
No,
thinking of a scapegoat?
scapegoat's not sociological. What's the
What?
sociological term for scapegoat? Look it up. Okay.
All
Okay,
right, give me a
so
sec.
when Teddy Roosevelt was police commissioner in New York, he there was a famous commission and they were testifying about immigration laws being out of control. And the police commissioner and his staff said, if we just eliminated the Irish and the Jews from the city of New York, our jails would be empty. So again, this is what happens is we have a short memory, but
Yeah,
I'm actually
we're
asking,
goldfish.
why are we willing to take away dignity of people and put them in incarceration? What is it about immigration that is so frightening? And I think it is more anthropological and sociological. People may speak a different language. They may eat a different food. They may play music differently. They may look like a group that threatens us because I'm 5'2", English speaking, 60 plus years old, and there's three tall, dark skinned or Asian boys chatting lively in their language on the subway platform, and I get nervous. Why do I do that? Well, this is a innate thing in humans and maybe even in animals. If you aren't familiar with the culture of the other or with the performance of the other, and if you're timid or you feel vulnerable, you might say, why are those boys so noisy on the subway? Why are they so tall? Why are they clogging the entrance? They shouldn't be here. Often, if you ever go to Fox News or you go onto one of these websites where people write comments on immigration stories, they often use this metaphor. If someone came to your home and camped out on your porch and then rang the doorbell and walked into your house, don't you have the right to expel them? And what they're saying is that's what immigration is. Well, it's a very powerful metaphor, except it ignores that most immigrants are not camping on your porch or knocking on your door or squatting in your house. They are in our territorial borders, and international human rights law and many countries in the world recognize inherent dignity in people and the right to migrate. It can be difficult. We want to manage it, but it doesn't have to be this instinctual fear and othering. So I just want to say sometimes, Ian, I was born in 1958, grew up in the Cold War. Uh,
We're contemporaries.
I definitely miss having the Soviet Union as our enemy because there was a way. I mean, I'm being a little
You
facetious because
I
so many
understand, but
people suffered.
you're not talking about the threat of the bomb.
Right.
You're
Well,
talking about
no,
having
talking about
2
we
polar
pull us
strengths.
together
That's
because
right.
we are in a race, the space race, or
And we're
we
not
are
going to
in
fight them
competitive
because
race.
it's too dangerous.
We have to use our influence to improve medicine in Latin America because
Go to the
otherwise
moon
we lose
because
that.
they got out
Exactly.
first. That
So
was
what
all.
I miss about that external enemy that united NATO, the United States, Europe, etc., is we didn't turn on the immigrant populations. And
You
this is
I'm
such
sorry,
a
would you repeat that? I didn't hear. We didn't
we
turn.
didn't turn on immigrant populations universally. I mean, we might turn on people like Emma Goldman because we thought she was an anarchist and a communist, and she was deported in 1919. But we didn't universally, constantly attack immigrants at a political level and get away with it because we were unified in our we want to be better than a country that has the iron curtain. We want to be the open society. We want to be the society that welcomes and incorporates. And a lot of people will say to me, older people, young people will say, well, that was fine until around the year, and they'll pick a year, 2000, 2008, 2020,
No,
but it's
just say
not fine
9/11.
anymore.
You just say
And
9/11. It was fine until 9/11.
those people that attacked us on 9/11 were college educated, extremely talented Saudis. Have we not persecuted any of those Saudi Arabians? Did we change our relationship with Saudi Arabia? We made some different visa checks. We've always had them in that region. But my point is that, yes, it was a horrible, horrible event of foreign terrorism, but that is not the justification for mistreating the population inside our own society that has accumulated over years through our inability to have any kind of pathway to status. I'm sure I love John Jay College, by the way. I like to go over there whenever I can.
Great school. It
It
really
is a
is. It's a
wonderful school
great
where a lot of
school.
students come from there to New York Law School.
Yeah.
I admire their education.
Yep.
We have a broad political spectrum. Again,
Yes, we
it's
do, and I
not
love that.
it's people of color or people of first generation immigration status or even immigrants themselves are not necessarily pro more immigration. They
No.
Some of the people that want the tightest immigration controls are those who want acceptance and integration by our society. So they think the way to get that is to turn off the faucet. Unfortunately, that's never been true.
I
But
I gotta tell you, I
mhm.
know that that may be their perspective, and so I'm not gonna push back on that. But ultimately, our original sin is race. And whether it's black, red, brown, yellow, and then we use race to avoid even looking at phenotype. It could be Catholic, Jewish, Muslim. And so
Educated, uneducated,
yeah, well,
certified, exempt.
and so the idea that there is that, I mean, yes, logic or some sort of sense of something not as horrific as disliking somebody because of their phenotype. Yeah, there are some of those, but for the most part, I think the driving force here is that we can identify a group by the color of their skin faster than anything else. It's the easiest, and they're the ones that are othered because they look so much more like others. And as
No,
human
I
beings,
do not disagree with you. I guess the point I just wanted to make as we're wrapping up is I don't know the solutions. Like I've studied this field for so long. I've been part of law reform efforts. I've done litigation. I've written dozens of academic papers advocating for fairness and efficiency and transparency. But the one thing I know is that the existing immigration law is full of closed doors.
mhm.
And so what happens when even if you marry someone that you cannot sponsor them, even if you're the parent of someone who becomes a US citizen, you may not be able to regularize your status. This 1996 provisions in the law I call the royal border. And most people don't know about them because I say to my students, it's section 212A9B. Have you read it? They say, what? It's very long. It's a little piece of code, statutory code, that says if you have overstayed a visa or you entered without inspection, and then you go back home to pick up your visa, because now you're married to a citizen or you're sponsored by an employer, you're barred for 10 years.
That's right. Yeah. You
What
can't come
the
back.
Congress members thought they were doing was incentivizing people to leave at the time their visa expired or not to come in the first place, as if people had read this very complicated piece of code. But the sociologists like Doug Massey at Princeton and others have shown that that one provision had the opposite effect. We used
Hmm.
to have a lot of seasonal migration, particularly with Mexico. And now what we have are people locked inside.
That's
Because if
right.
they leave with the militarization of the border, the danger at the border, the costs of getting across, people stay. And we have no path to status. Most other countries, because of the international human rights conventions, which we don't recognize, even though we tried to create those conventions in 1948, say that when the power of the nation state would destroy your family, your life, your sense of self, that has to give way to a case by case adjudication of whether this person should have a right to remain. We could change immigration law by recognizing some kind of statute of limitations, some kind of a balancing of factors and path to status, but we have very few. And so consequently, people push into areas that maybe they don't quite fit in an effort to win an exception. And the more we arrest and the more we detain, the more fearful people become, more they will go underground, will create a black market. That's not good for any worker, let alone the black market worker.
And I think actually your point um, of the unintended consequence of that little piece of code, I think we need to kind of invert that and think in terms of the horrific behavior of ICE and Border Patrol. And people are outraged, and rightly so. And that's, I understand that from the perspective of the American, but is that really, do they care about that? Because is that the audience that they're really actually trying to reach? And I'm not convinced that this behavior is about Americans. I think this behavior is basically to tell the world, you come in, this is what's going to happen to you. Whether it's legal or illegal, we don't want you. And that, of course, is just so, forget about morality because it's just a horrific. Okay, fine. But from an economic perspective,
It's
it's
gonna be it's
suicide.
gonna be
It's
devastating
suicide.
for the United States. Like, we have about 1,000,000 foreign students. They often are so important because they are very, very frequently the full pay tuition person.
That's right.
And there are many state schools where state legislatures in Kentucky and Indiana and these red states have gutted their education budgets, and they can do it because they filled their universities with primarily Chinese, Indian, and some European, some Canadians. There are law schools that have large graduate legal education programs called LLM that they pay full fare. They don't get the right to remain. They have temporary, very short work permission. They're funding their entire law school model and the salaries of professors and able to offer scholarships by foreign students. Well, what we're beginning to see already from the National Association of Foreign Student Advisors, the President's Alliance in Education, is a huge drop in applications to come to school here. And, our listener or viewer might say, good, then my child will get into Princeton or will get into Hunter. And it doesn't really work that
Doesn't work that
way
way.
because it may be that we have to lay off some of the professors in the system or close some of the departments because we don't have enough revenue anymore. So we're actually going to shrink the student body rather than make it easier to get in. And we may put some of our programs overseas, which is what many major universities did in 2016. They created overseas universities so they didn't have to deal with the foreign student visa issues. They could still collect revenues, private universities mostly, but some public universities are very creative as well. So we can go on because this is what I like to say. When I was in private practice, I was in a big international law firm, and I was always like, everyone's going, why is she here? I can find immigration issues in every merger and acquisition, every real estate deal, every marriage case, every divorce, every slip and fall case, because we are a society filled with lots of foreign nationals and we just haven't learned to see it. And so I hope that our conversation, whether you're a sociology student, a engaged listener, am I right? What my am I right about is let's not leap to conclusions. Let's treat people with human dignity. And let's not draw these lines so certainly that it's legitimate to treat people so cruelly simply by virtue of the lottery of where they were born.
May I add that while before you said I don't know the solution, I actually beg to differ
Okay.
because in fact you are part of the solution. You are already acting as part of that solution by the work you do as an attorney, the work you do as a professor, the work you do appearing on shows like mine, and to try because ultimately what needs to change more than anything is the narrative. If we tell stories that
I agree.
people can identify with, if they can look and see themselves in these stories of deporting people who are good human beings. Could that be you? Could that be your babysitter? Could that be a family member? We
Or
can
could you be the
finally,
mom who was monitoring what ICE was doing and they
that's
shoot
right.
you?
That's
Um,
right.
yeah.
And so that's why I want to push back just a little bit to your credit. The solution is what you are doing, and
Okay,
it
everybody come to
is
law
the
school.
reason and the reason that I do this podcast because love to work with my kids. You know, my college students. I got usually about 150 every semester. I know it's
Okay,
crazy,
it's a
but
lot.
let me tell you, man, that's a small number.
Yeah.
I want to reach more because
Yeah.
we've got to start telling good stories because the good stories are what sell, and we can sell morality. We can sell economic improvement and decency and integrity. We can. They
So
are not mutually exclusive. As a matter of fact, they really,
so
they
maybe I
really
could do a quick bibliography of where people can learn more if
please.
they've
I
got
hope you
intrigue.
do. Please do.
One of my favorite nonprofits, it's bipartisan, it's actually pretty global. The researchers are outstanding, is the Migration Policy Institute. So that if you put MPI.org, it doesn't quite work. So Migration Policy Institute, they're economists, they're lawyers, they're human rights people. They really do a good job of analyzing data like my data. I was talking about mixed families with US children. Another great place to learn more if you're a free market kind of person and you think, wait, we welcome foreign capital in this country. We like the stock market. Why do we constrain labor? So a group like Cato, which is a very right-wing libertarian organization, but they have a very good immigration research project. And so you can read quite a bit there about the economics impacts of immigration. And then for the stories of immigrants, there's just so many great websites, but Define American is one of them that talks about living in undocumented status and is trying to do understanding and explaining to build and break down these bridges. Another, there's a great journalist site here in New York called Documented NY, Documented New York, created a few years ago by two recent college grads who just felt that the positive immigration stories were not being adequately told, but also information was not being shared that immigrant needs. So here's a great thing they do. They do a freedom of information request and they get all the scofflaw employers, the ones who aren't paying wages, like work you and work you and work you and then refuse to pay. You have a database on Documented New York where you can say, do I want to work at this restaurant or this delivery
Oh,
service
that's
or
fabulous.
work in this hotel if they're not going to pay my wages? And they have so much great information they have reporters covering immigrant communities in several languages. Documented NY, it's a nonprofit. You can also donate to help support them. So those
And
were
are
just,
there, I'm sorry, but are there others like that because it's the internet, it's all over the place. So
yeah.
are there others
In
that
other
you might
cities,
find links to?
I'm not as sure, but I think that if one did a search and you say, reliable information for non-citizens on their rights. The ACLU does a great job. The National Immigration Project of the National Lawyers Guild is one of my deeply held
Oh,
favorites. I
absolutely.
mean, there's over 100 nonprofits in New York alone. The cities, there are new American models of Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, and our state also has something called the Office of New Americans. I should give them a shout out. They put out the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, created by Giuliani way, way back
He was a human being a while ago.
a while
I
ago.
wasn't I
Poor
wasn't I
man is
wasn't a fan then, but
no,
I
poor man
did
is quite
there were
ill.
things, yeah.
But Moya, so it's Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs in the New York City, and you could find one in other cities as well. They have Know Your Rights materials, language access, and they have a 1-800 hotline for non-citizens who are trying to find good legal representation. So I hope people will enjoy this and be inspired to read about our Chinese exclusion laws, to read about how we treated the Irish, to understand that Jews and Italians were hated at one time, and to think more complexly about the arguments. You can go back and read the congressional history. You can read the arguments that were made. They are
That's right.
exactly the same arguments
They
being
are.
made today, just with a different group being targeted.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope
So
that was good. Ian, thank you
it
for
was
having me.
wonderful, and I'm telling you, what you do matters, and I know you know that, but I wanna say that because you deserve to
I have
hear it.
bad days.
We all do, but what you are doing matters, and I am so grateful that you were willing to share your insights, your specialty, and your passion on my show. What if
Thanks.
I'm right?